She called 911 and said someone was inside her house. Minutes later, she vanished without a trace. But the real horror, the person behind it was someone everyone trusted. Ridgewood was the kind of town people dreamed about. Quiet streets. Friendly neighbors. The kind of place where everyone waved, even if they didn't know you well. Kids rode their bikes until the streetlights came on, and no one ever worried about locking their doors at night. Nothing bad ever happened in Ridgewood. At least, that's what people believed. But on a cold October night, everything changed. The air felt different that evening. A sharp wind moved through the trees, making the dry leaves scrape across the pavement. Streetlights flickered, as if they were struggling to stay alive. Most people stayed inside, wrapped in blankets, watching TV or getting ready for bed. On Maple Street, at the far end of town, stood an old house. It belonged to Emily Carter. Emily had moved into the house just 2 weeks earlier, after her grandmother passed away. The place was old, filled with memories, and things no one had touched in years. Boxes were still stacked in corners, and the faint smell of dust and wood lingered in every room. But Emily didn't mind. She liked the quiet. At least, she thought she did. That night, Emily sat alone in her living room, grading papers from her class. A small lamp cast a warm glow, barely lighting the room. Outside, the wind grew louder, tapping branches against the windows. Tick-tap, tick. At first, she ignored it. But then she heard something else. A sound that didn't belong. A faint creak. Emily looked up. Her eyes moved slowly toward the hallway. "Hello," she called out. No answer. She held her breath, listening carefully. Silence. After a moment, she shook her head and let out a small nervous laugh. "It's just the house," she whispered to herself. Old houses made noises all the time. Still, something didn't feel right. She stood up and walked toward the hallway, her footsteps slow and careful. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet. Every sound felt louder than usual. She checked the kitchen. Nothing. She checked the back door. Locked. The windows were shut tight. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Emily returned to the living room, trying to calm herself down. She picked up her phone, scrolling mindlessly as if to distract herself. That's when the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then everything went still again. Emily froze. Her heart started beating faster. "Okay. That's not funny," she said quietly, though no one was there to hear her. She looked around the room. That's when she noticed it. The front door. It was slightly open. Just a few inches. Emily was sure she had locked it earlier. She stood up slowly, her eyes fixed on the door. The cold air from outside slipped into the room, brushing against her skin. "Did I forget?" she whispered. She walked toward it, each step heavier than the last. The house felt different now, like someone else was there, watching. When she reached the door, she hesitated. Her hand hovered over the handle. For a moment, she thought about closing it and pretending nothing was wrong. But something inside her told her to look. Slowly, she pulled the door open. The porch was empty. The street was quiet. No cars, no people, just the sound of wind and leaves moving across the ground. Emily stepped outside, looking left then right. Nothing. But as she turned to go back inside, she saw it. At the far end of the street, barely visible under a dim streetlight, a shadow. Standing still, watching her. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Hello," she called out, her voice shaking. The figure didn't move. For a few seconds, everything felt frozen in time. Then suddenly, the porch light flickered behind her. Emily turned back for just a second. And when she looked again, the figure was gone. Completely gone. Her heart was racing now. She quickly stepped back inside and slammed the door shut, locking it this time. Her hands trembled as she backed away. "This isn't real, this isn't real," she whispered. But deep down she knew it was. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Emily grabbed her phone. Her fingers shook as she dialed. 911 to call connected. 911, what's your emergency? Emily struggled to speak. I think, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then she looked toward the hallway again. The same hallway she had checked just minutes earlier. But this time, she heard it clearly. Footsteps, slow, heavy, coming from inside the house. Emily's eyes widened in terror. "I think someone is in my house." There was a sudden noise, a light thud. The line went quiet. And then, the call disconnected. When the police arrived just minutes later, the house was silent. The front door was wide open. Lights still on. Her phone would DL on the floor. But Emily Carter was gone. By morning, Ridgewood was no longer the same quiet town people believed it to be. News of Emily Carter's disappearance spread fast. Police cars lined Maple Street. Yellow tape blocked off the house. Neighbors stood in small groups, whispering, their faces filled with fear and confusion. No one could believe something like this had happened here. A missing woman. No signs of struggle. No answers. Detective Mark Hayes arrived early that morning. He had worked in Ridgewood for over 10 years and had never seen a case like this. As he stepped out of his car, he looked at Emily's house carefully. Something about it felt wrong, too still, too quiet. Inside, officers were already searching every corner again. Hayes walked through the front door, noticing the small details others might miss. The lamp was still on. Papers were scattered on the table. A coffee mug sat half full, now cold. It looked like Emily had just vanished in the middle of her normal life. "Anything?" Hayes asked one of the officers. "Nothing useful," the officer replied. "No forced entry. No fingerprints that don't belong. It's like she just walked out." Hayes frowned. "People don't just disappear. Someone always knows something. And in a small town like Ridgewood, someone always sees something." That's when he heard about the neighbor, Daniel Brooks, the last person to see Emily alive. Daniel lived right next door. His house was small but well kept. When Hayes knocked, it took a few seconds before the door slowly opened. Daniel stood there, looking tired and nervous. "Mr. Brooks," Hayes said. "I'm Detective Hayes. I just have a few questions." Daniel nodded quickly. Yeah, of course. Come in." Inside, the house was neat, almost too neat. Everything was perfectly in place. Hayes noticed how clean the floors were, how nothing seemed out of order. Daniel kept rubbing his hands together. A small detail, but Hayes didn't miss it. "When was the last time you saw Emily Carter?" Hayes asked. Daniel swallowed. "Last night," he said. "Around 9:30, I think." Hayes leaned slightly forward. "What was she doing?" Daniel hesitated for just a moment. "She was standing on her porch," he said. "Just standing there, alone." Daniel nodded. "Yeah. Did she say anything to you?" Another pause. "She looked scared," Daniel admitted. "I asked if she was okay, but she didn't really answer." Hayes studied his face. "Did you see anyone else? Anyone on the street?" Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, no one." That was the first thing that didn't feel right. Too prick, too certain. "Mr. Brooks," Hayes said calmly, "you mentioned she looked scared. What exactly do you mean?" Daniel looked down for a second. "Like she saw something," he said quietly. "What did she see?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I don't know." Hayes didn't respond immediately. He just watched him. People often reveal more in silence than in words. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "She was staring out into the street," he said. Like someone was there." "Was there?" Daniel shook his head again. "I didn't see anyone." Later that afternoon, Hayes stood outside reviewing security footage collected from nearby streets. Ridgewood didn't have many cameras, but there was one at a gas station just 2 blocks away from Maple Street. Sometimes, that was all it took. The footage showed a quiet road. Timestamp 9:27 p.m. Nothing unusual. Then, at exactly 9:20, a pickup truck appeared. It drove slowly past the camera, too slowly. Hayes leaned closer to the screen. "Pause it," he said. The image froze. The truck's windows were dark. You couldn't see inside. "No plates?" Hayes asked. "Can't make them out," the officer replied. Hayes nodded. Keep playing. The truck turned onto Maple Street, and then, it disappeared from view. Do we have any cameras on Maple? Hayes asked. The officer shook his head. No, sir. DeHaze crossed his arms, thinking. All right, he said. Let's check the next camera. Maybe it shows the truck leaving. They pulled up footage from another camera further down the road. Time passed. 9:30 p.m., 9:35 p.m., 9:50 p.m. Nothing. No black truck. It never came out. Hayes felt a chill run down his spine. That's not possible, the officer said. But Hayes knew better. It was possible. It just meant one thing. The truck didn't leave. As evening approached, Hayes returned to Maple Street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road. He stood in front of Emily's house, looking around slowly. Everything looked normal. But now he knew. Something had entered this street last night. And it was still connected to what happened. His eyes shifted toward the neighbor's house. Daniel Brooks. The last person to see Emily. The man who said he saw nothing. But something didn't add up. Hayes had seen that look before. Nervous hands. Hesitation. Carefully chosen words. Daniel wasn't telling the full story. And in a case like this, that could mean everything. As the street grew darker, Hayes made a quiet decision. He would be back. Because one thing was now clear. Emily Carter didn't just disappear. Someone took her. And someone in this town knew exactly what happened. By the third day, the case had taken over Ridgewood. No one talked about anything else. Emily Carter's face was everywhere. On phone screens, in group chats, on printed flyers taped to street poles. Volunteers walked door to door asking questions, hoping someone had seen something, anything. But the answers were always the same. No. I didn't notice anything. I wish I could help. It was like the truth was hiding in plain sight. Detective Mark Hayes stood once again inside Emily's house. This time, he wasn't just looking. He was searching. Carefully. Patiently. Because he knew something others didn't. Houses don't lie. People do. The living room looked exactly the same as before. The lamp still stood in the corner. The stack of papers on the table hadn't moved. Everything was frozen in time, like Emily had just stepped out for a moment. But Hayes wasn't interested in what was obvious. He walked slowly toward the hallway, the same hallway Emily had looked at during her 911 call. He stopped, listened. Nothing. Still something about it felt wrong. Check every inch, he told the officers behind him. Walls, floors, everything. I want this place taken apart if we have to. The search began again, this time more detailed than ever. An hour passed. Then 2. Nothing. Frustration started to build. Until, "Detective!" one of the officers called from the basement. Hayes moved quickly. The basement was cold and dim, lit by a single weak bulb hanging from the ceiling. The air smelled old heavy, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. "What did you find?" Hayes asked. The officer pointed toward the far wall. At first glance, it looked normal. Just wooden shelves stacked with old boxes and forgotten items. But something was off. Hayes stepped closer. The shelves weren't fixed to the wall. They had been moved. Recently. "Move these," he said. The officers carefully pulled the shelves aside. And that's when they saw it. A small door. Hidden behind the wall. Old. Wooden. And locked. Hayes felt a strange tension in his chest. This wasn't in the house records, one officer said quietly. "No," Hayes replied. "It wasn't." He stepped forward. "Break it open." The one strong hit, then another. The lock snapped. The door creaked open slowly, and a cold wave of air rushed out. Inside was a narrow room, small, claustrophobic. The kind of space that made your skin crawl the moment you stepped in. Hayes walked in first. The light from the basement barely reached inside, so an officer brought a flashlight. What they saw next changed everything. The walls were covered, from top to bottom, with newspaper clippings, old ones, some faded, some torn. Every single one was about missing people, different names, different dates, different towns, but all with the same story. Someone vanished. Without a trace. "Detective," The officer whispered, "This goes back years." Hayes stepped closer to the wall reading. Scanning. Trying to find a pattern. Some of the cases were from Ridgewood. Others were from nearby towns. But they all shared one thing. They were never solved. Then Hayes noticed something else. A small wooden table in the center of the room. On it, a stack of papers. He picked them up. Notes. Handwritten. Dates. Times. Locations. It looked like someone had been tracking these disappearances. Studying them. Trying to connect them. This was Emily, Hayes said quietly. She was investigating. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. Not even close. Because right in the middle of the table was a single pictograph. Hayes slowly picked it up. And the moment he saw it, his expression changed. It was Emily, standing outside her house, wearing the same clothes she had on the night she disappeared. The photo was clear. Close. Too close. It wasn't taken from far away. It was taken by someone standing just a few feet from her. Watching her. Following her. A silence filled the room. Heavy. Uncomfortable. "This doesn't make sense," one officer said. "If she was investigating, why didn't she tell anyone?" Hayes didn't answer right away. Because he was thinking. Fast. Emily had found something. Something big. Something dangerous enough that someone had been watching her. Waiting. Planning. And when she got too close to the truth, she disappeared. Hayes looked around the room again. Slowly. Carefully. Then something else caught his eye. A small mark on the wall. Near the corner. He walked toward it. It looked like scratches. Deep ones. Like someone had tried to claw their way out. Hayes felt a chill run down his spine. This room wasn't just for research. It had been used. Before. He stepped back, taking one last look at everything. The clippings, the notes, the photo, the scratches. This wasn't random. This was organized, planned. And whoever was behind it had been doing it for a long time. As Hayes walked out of the hidden room, his mind was already connecting the pieces. Emily Carter wasn't just a victim. She had been getting closer to the truth. Closer than anyone before her. And now, she was gone. Standing at the top of the basement stairs, Hayes turned to his team. "Shield this room," he said. "No one touches anything without my approval." He paused. Then added, "And find out everything Emily was working on." Because now he knew. This case was bigger than a missing person. Much bigger, and somewhere out there, the person behind it all was still watching, still waiting, and maybe already planning what comes next. By the fourth day, the pressure was building. The discovery in Emily's basement had changed everything. This was no longer just a missing person case. It was something bigger, darker, more dangerous. And Detective Mark Hayes knew one thing for sure. Emily hadn't been alone in this. Someone else knew what she was doing. Someone close. Hayes sat in his car across from Daniel Brooks' house, watching quietly. The street looked normal. Too normal. Kids riding bikes. Neighbors talking. Life going on like nothing had changed. But Hayes wasn't fooled. He had seen it before. The calm before the truth breaks open. Daniel's house stood still, curtains drawn. No movement. No sound. But Hayes knew he was inside, waiting. This time, Hayes didn't knock gently. He knocked hard. 3 sharp hits. A pause. Then footsteps. The door opened slowly. Daniel stood there again. But he looked different now. More tired, more stressed, and more afraid. "Mr. Brooks," Hayes said firmly. "We need to talk." Daniel swallowed and stepped aside. "Yeah, I figured." Inside, the air felt heavy. Like the house itself knew something was wrong. Hayes didn't sit. He stayed standing, watching, waiting. "Your story doesn't add up," Hayes said directly. Daniel looked down, avoiding eye contact. "I told you what I saw." "No," Hayes replied calmly. "You told me part of it." Silence filled the room. Then Hayes took a step closer. "Wa found something in Emily's house," he said. "A hidden room." Daniel's head snapped up. For a split second, fear flashed across his face. Real fear. "You knew about it," Hayes said. It wasn't a question. Daniel's breathing got heavier. I didn't go inside," he said quickly. I swear. But you knew it was there. Daniel didn't respond. That was answer enough. Hayes changed his tone. Softer, but more dangerous. Daniel, he said, Emily is missing. And right now, you're the last person who saw her alive. If you're hiding something, this is your chance to fix it. Daniel ran his hands through his hair. Pacing now. Struggling. Then finally, he stopped. I didn't take her, he said. I was trying to help her. Hayes stayed silent, letting him talk, because now the truth was starting to come out. A week ago, A began. Emily came to me. Late at night. She looked scared. Really scared. He paused, remembering. She told me she found something in the basement. That hidden room. Hayes nodded slightly. What did she say about it? Daniel hesitated. She thought her grandmother was hiding something, he said. At first, she thought it was just old stories. But then she started reading those articles. The missing people. He looked up at Hayes. She believed they were all connected. Hayes felt a shift. Connected how? Daniel shook his head slowly. She didn't know yet, but she said someone else did. Woo. She didn't say, Daniel replied. But she told me something I can't forget. He leaned forward slightly. She said, I'm not being watched. Daniel's voice dropped. I'm being followed. A silence filled the room again. Heavy, uncomfortable. Did she say by who? Hayes asked. No, Daniel said. But after that, things got worse. Daniel walked toward the window, looking outside nervously. She started getting calls. He continued. Late at night. Same time, every night. What kind of calls? Daniel swallowed. No one spoke. He said. Just breathing. Hayes narrowed his eyes. Did she report it? She was going to, Daniel said quickly, but then she changed her mind. Why? Daniel turned back slowly. Because she thought the person watching her might already be inside the system. That caught Hayes' attention. Inside, he repeated. Daniel nodded. She didn't trust anyone, he said. Not even the police. For the first time. For Hayes didn't respond immediately. Did you believe her? He asked after a moment. Daniel let out a shaky breath. I didn't want to, he admitted. But then. What? Daniel pointed toward the street. I saw that truck. Hayes' expression sharpened. The black pickup. Daniel nodded. It had been driving by every night, he said. Slow. Watching. Did Emily see it? Wes, Daniel said. The night she disappeared, she was staring right at it. Everything was starting to connect. The truck. The fear. The calls. Why didn't you tell me this before? Hayes asked. Daniel looked down again. Because I was scared, he said honestly. If she was right, if someone powerful was behind this. He trailed off. I didn't want to be next. The room fell silent again, but this time, it felt different. Clearer. Closer to the truth. Hayes straightened. One last thing, he said. Daniel looked up. Did Emily ever mention a place? Somewhere she thought all of this was connected to. Daniel hesitated, then slowly nodded. Yes, he said. We're. Daniel's voice dropped to almost a whisper. An old farmhouse, just outside town. That Hayes felt that same cold chill again, because now, they finally had a direction. As he walked out of Daniel's house, the sun was beginning to set. The sky turned dark orange, then slowly, gray. Hayes stopped for a moment, looking down the empty road. Everything that had happened, every clue, every lie, was leading to one place. The farmhouse. And deep down, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever was waiting there was not going to be easy to face. Because this wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a trap. And someone had been planning it for a very long time. The road to the farmhouse was long and empty. It stretched far beyond the edge of Ridgewood, where streetlights disappeared and darkness took over. Trees lined both sides, their branches twisting like shadows in the night. Detective Mark Hayes sat in the passenger seat of the police UV, staring ahead. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the crackle of the radio. Behind them, 2 more patrol cars followed. Lights off. Silent. They didn't want to be seen. Everyone ready. Hayes finally said into his radio. A few quiet voices responded. Ready. On your lead. Hayes looked out the window again. Up ahead, a shape slowly appeared in the darkness. The farmhouse. Old, falling apart. Completely isolated. It looked like no one had lived there for years. But Hayes knew better. The vehicles stopped a short distance away. Engines off. Total silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then Hayes opened the door. Let's go. The officers approached carefully, weapons drawn. Each step felt heavier than the last. The wind pushed against the broken wood of the house, making it creak softly. The front door was slightly open, just like Emily's. Hayes raised his hand. On 3, he whispered. 1, 2, 3. They pushed the door open and rushed inside. Police! Don't move. Their voices echoed through the house. But there was no response. The inside smelled of dust and something worse. Something old, rotten. Flashlights cut through the darkness, scanning every corner. The living room was empty. Furniture covered in sheets. Broken glass on the floor. No signs of movement. Clear. One officer called out. Kitchen clear. Upstairs clear. Hayes stepped forward slowly. Something wasn't right. He could feel it. The same feeling he had in Emily's house. Like something was hidden. Watching. Then, he saw it. Fresh tire marks. Right there on the dusty floor, leading toward the back of the house. Over here, he said. The team followed. The tracks stopped near an old wooden hatch in the ground, half hidden under a torn rug. Hayes looked at it for a moment. Then back at his team. This is it. The hatch was heavy. It took 2 officers to pull it open. A cold, damp smell rushed out. Worse than before. Much worse. A narrow set of stairs led down into darkness. Lights, Hayes said. Flashlights pointed down. But the beam didn't reach the bottom. Stay close, he ordered. Then he stepped down first. Each step creaked loudly. The air grew colder, thicker, harder to breathe. At the bottom, the space opened up. A hidden underground chamber, dark, silent. Then a sound, a weak voice. Help! Every officer froze. Did you hear that? One whisper, Hayes said, moving quickly. They followed the sound, and then, they found her. Emily Carter. She was lying on the ground, weak but alive. Her hands were tied, her face pale, but her eyes. They opened slowly as the light hit her. You came, she whispered. Relief hit the room for just a second. But then, they saw the others, 3 more people. All alive, all missing for years, barely able to move. Call medical, now, an officer shouted. But Hayes didn't move, because something felt wrong. Again, too easy. He slowly turned around, scanning the room, looking into the shadows. And then, he saw him, a figure standing quietly in the corner, calm, still, watching everything. An officer raised his weapon. Don't move. The man stepped forward into the light. And in that moment, everything changed. It was Detective Mark Hayes. No, not the Hayes standing with them. The real Hayes. For a second, no one understood. Then the truth hit like a shock. The man leading the KC, the man giving orders, slowly lowered his weapon, and smiled. You weren't supposed to find this place, he said calmly. Panic spread instantly. Officers looked at each other, confused. What's going on? One shouted. The truth came crashing down. The man they trusted was the one behind everything. For years, Hayes had been using his position, choosing victims, covering his tracks, staying invisible. Emily's grandmother had discovered it first. She had gotten too close. So he made her disappear. And when Emily started asking questions, he knew it was only a matter of time. She was smart, Hayes said, glancing at Emily. Too smart. Drop your weapon, an officer yelled. But Hayes didn't move. He just stood there, calm, in control. Do you know what the problem is with small towns? he said quietly. No one looks beneath the surface. His eyes moved across the room. They trust too easily. Suddenly, he reached into his jacket. Gun, someone shouted. But before he could react, a loud shot echoed through the chamber. Hayes dropped to the ground. Silence followed. Heavy, shocking. An officer had fired first. The threat was over. Within minutes paramedics rushed in. Emily and the others were carried out. Alive. Safe. As Hayes' body was taken away, no one spoke. No one could. Because nothing made sense anymore. Back in Ridgewood, the news spread faster than ever before. The man they trusted most, the man meant to protect them, was the monster all along. The town changed that night. Forever. Doors were locked. Lights stayed on. People looked at each other differently. Because they had learned something they would never forget. Evil doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes, it's been standing beside you the whole time.